discovered I have a new driving pet peeve today.
Okay.
You're gonna cackle. It's not even like one that's illegal by any means, but it was kind of raining today on the way home.
Mm-hmm.
And it rained pretty hard for a little bit, and then it slowed to like a light drizzle where like you barely need your wipers on. And the ick I discovered is when a person on the roads wipers are going far too hard for the actual rain that's happening. I pulled up to a set of lights. There was 2 vehicles in front of me, one in each lane, and their wipers were like going crazy, and it was like a light mist.
You just like calm down.
And I was like, maybe they just drove through a really heavy storm and they just haven't turned them off yet. And then I'm like, no, that's not it. They're just crazy. I don't know if anyone else is like icked out by this, but I saw it and I was like, ugh.
That's so random. You must have been having a bad day to begin with, and it was like, I'm done with all of you.
Literally, I could see them both, and I'm like, you idiots, your fucking wipers are on too high. Like, I don't know. It doesn't hurt anyone, but I'm like, at that point,
oh my God.
it's more distracting when your wipers are going hell for leather than you know what I mean? I don't know. That's just my dumb thing.
My thing is kind of the opposite, where like you're driving with somebody and they don't turn them on.
Oh, yeah, and you're like, is your visibility is becoming excuse me, hello, it's being hindered. Can you
I haven't experienced that for a very long time, luckily, but like it's something that like I'm just like, clean your fucking windshield, because I think it's because I wear glasses, and so to me that's the equivalent of dirty glasses, but like in a much bigger way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know.
Speaking of ick, shall we start the show?
I guess so.
All right.
Hello, everyone. I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Grim Curriculum. Thank you so much for listening.
And shout out and thank you to everyone watching the video over on Patreon. Hello.
Hello. That was a creepy way.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
That'll probably be the last time we laugh today, folks.
It will be. Yeah, because we are now on to part 3 of our Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka series. How you feeling?
You know, I was just actually giving some thought to this today as I was getting ready to come over here, and we talked about this last episode and a little bit, I think, on Extra Credit. There's a good chance that Paul Bernardo could have parole one day, and that really kind of scares me.
It really could happen, and I mean, I don't know. Willie Picton almost got it, and then he got shanked up the nose with a broomstick, so it could happen to Paul too, but he's up for day parole so often, and all it takes is one person being like, he's had enough.
Yeah, I think he should be rehabilitated. He's not a risk to society anymore.
No, just little girls.
Ugh, so gross.
But hopefully that never happens.
I really hope not. I hope he dies in prison, quite frankly, but I digress. We'll get on to that at some point, I'm sure. So last week, we left off with the discovery of Leslie Mahaffey's body,
which incidentally also fell on the day that Paul and Karla got married.
But before we talk further about the couple tying the knot, let's discuss something that happened shortly before that. Karla's special wedding gift to Paul. And yes, that is what she called this.
You see, Paul was upset about the loss of Tammy, not because they killed her and he felt guilty, but because he no longer had almost constant access to what he called a plaything. He would complain about this to Karla, who almost immediately began to seek out another young virgin for him.
This victim was dubbed Jane Doe by investigators as well as the media to protect her identity. What happened to her would not be discovered until the trial.
Karla and Jane knew each other from the pet store, and despite the age difference, they got along quite well. Jane thought of Karla as a cool, older role model who was everything she wanted to be. When Karla invited her out for dinner, she was eager and she happily accepted.
The two went out and had a nice time before returning to 57 Bayview, where they chatted for hours, watched a movie, and had some drinks.
What Jane didn't know was that the drinks had been spiked with halcyon, which caused her to go unconscious. Karla then excitedly got Paul and told him to come see his special surprise gift. When he saw her, he was thrilled. Not only was Jane young, she bore a striking resemblance to Tammy.
He raised his concerns when he found out about the halcyon. He didn't want another inconvenient death on their hands, but Karla assured him that it was all well under control.
They undressed Jane together, and Paul began to sexually assault her, taking her virginity. He then escalated it to anal sex. When he was done, Karla cleaned up the blood and put Jane to bed. She had not woken up throughout the entire attack.
The next morning, she woke up completely unaware of what had happened. This was not her first visit to the home, and sadly, it would not be her last.
Absolutely sickening.
That's so fucking awful.
And it's, to me, even worse because it's the same thing that happened with Tammy. It was a younger girl who respected Karla, who looked up to Karla and felt safe with her, and they just took advantage of that.
So they kept Jane around for a while, basically until her mother started questioning why the two of them were constantly hanging around with her teenage daughter.
But let's get on to the wedding, shall we?
I guess we shall.
Yes.
Paul had asserted major control over the whole thing. He wanted the couple to appear as perfect as possible. He even chose Karla's dress and hairstyle.
He had big plans for the wedding. In his mind, if people were invited to a lavish wedding, they would give lavish gifts. About this, he said,
"If I spend $50 a plate, I expect to get $100 per person." Hey, buddy, you're not supposed to make a profit off of your wedding. Hello?
He was expecting to make about $50,000 off of this wedding.
On what planet, my guy?
Yeah, he's like, everyone's going to give us gifts. We're going to treat them to a nice wedding. We're not going to have to pay for it because your parents are going to pay for it probably. And we're going to make some bank.
Did this actually happen?
It did not.
Go figure. I'm very glad it did not. Karla couldn't have been more thrilled with this whole thing. The rest of the Homolka family wasn't quite as excited.
Yeah, because they were still mourning the death of Tammy.
How it would be sad and tragic enough, because I'm sure this has happened before where maybe parents have lost a son or a daughter and then had the other sibling go on to marry.
Yeah.
And that must, there must be a lot of high emotions when it comes to something like that, or any loss of a family member during a wedding. It's like, oh man, I miss them. I wish they could be here. But then to find out after the fact must have been even more brutal.
Yeah, next week I'm going to share how they found out that it was Karla and Paul in a letter that she wrote them. And we're going to read that letter next week. And it's going to piss you off.
I guess you guys can brace 1 week ahead of time.
Yes, you can.
It really seems that due to this, very few people around them were in the mood to celebrate. Those who knew them chatted about the wedding, and they all seemed to ask the same thing. Why were they getting married so shortly after the family had experienced a tragic event?
To this, the lovebirds replied, "The show must go on."
That's what they actually said, which I think it is appropriate because it was a show.
Oh, absolutely.
It was an absolute farce.
In their minds, 6 months had gone by. Had that not been long enough?
In fact, this was something Karla complained about to multiple people. In a letter to a friend, she wrote,
"My wedding plans are going great, except that my parents are being assholes.
How dare they grieve the loss of a daughter?
They pulled half of the money out, and now me and Paul will have to pay for $7,000 to $8,000 of this wedding. My father doesn't even want us to have a wedding. He hasn't worked except for 1 day since Tammy died. He's wallowing in his grief."
Whoa. If we didn't know Karla was a heartless psychopath before this, what does it? No empathy whatsoever.
That's the thing. And that's why, like, towards the end of this episode and a little bit next week, we're going to talk about her trying to play the victim here.
Mm-hmm.
But we see these things from her again and again that show she is not capable of remorse. She's not capable of empathy. All she thinks about is Karla and Paul. And she was like, aren't they over it yet? It's been 6 months.
Yeah, why can't they be happy for me? It's like, bitch, grieving takes as long as it's going to take.
And you'd think she'd be grieving a little bit too.
You would think, but I mean, what it says all about her. So let's talk about the wedding because we have brought it up before.
So I wanted to just look at a picture of Karla
because
I was trying to come up with an adjective for what she looked like. during this wedding, because I was like, Karla's looking like and then I just put a blank because I have so many words and none of them just seem to fit. So let's look at a picture of her and you tell me what comes to mind for you. Okay, like
I just at first glance, it's just like, oh my god, they look like a couple of young kids getting married. But I don't know, there's something that seems horrifically fake about it.
I'm happy for anyone who can afford to have a lavish wedding,
Oh,
especially if it's what
sure.
you want. Congratulations, that's fantastic. But to me, it looks like she wrote down all the things that like happened in like a little girl's dream wedding, and then she did that, but not because she necessarily wanted to. Because one thing that we haven't really talked about is that in her younger years, Karla was a bit of a goth chick.
Oh, you know what? This does not surprise me in the sense that she's an edgelord.
Very much so.
So I feel like she would lean towards the goth, the emo, for the
Yes.
drama of it all.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's not me at all dissing goth or emo. I fucking love it. But I'm saying I feel like Karla would look at it superficially and be like, oh yeah, that's me.
As a retired emo kid, we do not claim Karla Homolka.
No, absolutely not.
But it's so extravagant and it's so extreme and it's just all a little bit too much. But again, it's what you said, it's a farce. It is not there. I'm sure in their own way they did love each other a lot.
I think there was, if not love, definitely a very strong attachment to one another.
Absolutely. So for the wedding, they had a horse-drawn carriage. They had peasant stuffed with veal for dinner, like we discussed before.
Peasant or pheasant?
Oh my god. They ate all the peasants.
Hey, at this point,
they would.
I wouldn't put cannibalism past either of them at this point, but
pheasant stuffed with veal.
So extra, though.
I know, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. And here's Paul, and he's just like, if we order the most expensive food, they're gonna have no choice but to give us expensive gifts.
No, sweetie, that's not how that works, you fucking asshole. And I do love how Karla is complaining here that in the end, they're going to have to shell out $7 or $8 grand themselves. Meanwhile, he thinks he's going to make $50K off his own stupid wedding.
He's a finance bro. He's like, oh, it's an investment.
Delusional. In typical Paul and Karla fashion, the majority of the wedding was filmed, which makes it very interesting to look back at in hindsight.
Especially the one lady saying Paul is the best thing to ever happen to Karla. She's like, we love you, Paul. You're the best thing that ever happened to Karla.
Oh, sweetie, no. All while this is happening, a dive team was investigating the scene where Leslie Mahaffey's body was found. There were TVs at the venue, and many of their friends and family watched the news as it unfolded.
Paul and Karla found more victims after this time. More often than not, the two would drive around together. After all, young ladies were less likely to enter a vehicle with a lone man while there was a known sexual offender out and about. However, Karla being there made them more at ease and therefore more likely to speak to them.
Yes, and a lot of serial killers who are couples employ this method all the time. And there's even been some who have done so with like a baby in the car.
Yeah.
Because nothing seems threatening about a cute little family.
And then the baby's the serial killer. You don't know.
I mean, hey.
The thing with these two is we know how many people they murdered, or at least we think we know. Like, we're pretty sure we know the amount, but we have no clue just how many people they victimized, because there's a very long list of sexual assault victims as well as potential attacks they may have committed, and they reach all the way from Toronto to Florida to Hawaii.
That's crazy. Even when they were going on vacation, they didn't stop this fucking shit.
Oh, on vacation, it was even more exciting for them.
You know what? That makes total sense for them. During the afternoon of April 16th, 1992, the two were driving through St. Catharines when they spotted 15-year-old Kristen French near her home. They drove into a nearby parking lot, and Karla got out of the car with a map.
And with that being said, I do want to give you guys a warning. I know sometimes it might seem almost redundant when we give warnings because of the nature of what we talk about. I will say this was a very, very difficult case to research and write. What we talked about so far with Tammy and with Leslie, horrific, but what happened to this young girl is going to be difficult to hear.
So Karla called her over and asked for directions. Paul got out of the car with a knife. He forced her into the vehicle and then blindfolded her. Karla then drove the trio to their home, which was only a few kilometers away.
They are absolutely shameless at this point. This was in the middle of the day at a church parking lot. A witness saw this and reported a young girl getting into a Camaro. But unfortunately, the lady didn't know cars very well because Paul drove a different make of vehicle. And this would send police down on a wild goose chase and delay the investigation even further.
The one good thing that came from this was that it gave law enforcement new information. There were two people, not just one man.
When they arrived, Paul watched Kristen use the bathroom. They then forced her to drink alcohol. Kristen, knowing that her life was very much at risk, did what the couple wanted. Unfortunately for her, a victim that didn't fight back just made Paul more eager to inflict torture upon her.
The following quotes are from the tapes.
And this is rough.
Yeah, it gets real gross, guys, so just brace.
Yeah. He said to her, "I'm going to piss on you, okay? Then I'm going to shit on you."
Kristen was too terrified to even move.
He then said, "Don't worry, I won't piss in your face."
He then urinated on her. Paul then attempted to defecate on her face, but failed. He told her,
"You're a fucking piece of shit, but I like you. You look good covered in piss."
That's so foul.
This is a young teenage girl. And the thing that just makes it even more nightmarish is that it was around like 2-3 p.m.
That must affect you psychologically, I feel, because I think deep in our little lizard brains, we kind of think, oh, only bad things happen in the dark. And to me, it's so much scarier that this is happening in broad daylight.
And also, 2 to 3 p.m., a church parking lot. She had walked that way every single day. It was on her way home. She is in her school uniform. So she's got, she is dressed as what I would assume Paul considered to be his perfect victim.
Literally, though.
And all I thought about during all of this and the way that I kind of just coped with it. Remember on Extra Credit when we talked about scaphism?
Yes.
That's what he deserves.
Yep, absolutely. I'm not going to explain it to you guys right now. If you want to look it up, feel free. But it's an ancient torture method.
Yeah.
I usually wouldn't condone torture.
No.
But in this case, I think it gets a pass.
Yeah.
Ugh. The assault would continue on and off for days. Paul tortured her mercilessly, but Karla had a different approach to this one.
I find this so strange, but it also shows just how, again, little empathy she has.
Karla would later say that this murder was quote-unquote emotional torment for her because she felt that she and Kristen were becoming friends. Here's a quote from Karla.
"I never should have gotten to know Kristen because you get emotionally involved with these people and it really hurts. It hurts a lot more because I felt like I was friends with both of them, especially Kristen, because we did so much stuff together. We put makeup on together, we talked, just girl talk when Paul was gone getting us food, and it just made it hurt even more."
It was Karla's job to guard Kristen when Paul was gone. She kept a mallet nearby in case Kristen ever tried to get away. She basically told her everything would be fine, only for Paul to come back and assault her further. Despite what Karla said, she very much took part in these assaults. According to what was revealed in court, she seemed to be having a fantastic time.
And the scary thing is, according to a lot of stuff I read during this attack, she wore this black leather mask.
Ew.
Yeah. And you guys, Paul rapped for her. He decided now was a good time to test out his new material on Kristen, as she essentially smiled and nodded in hopes that if she did what he said, she just might survive.
And for those of you who are curious about what this rap may have sounded like, please visit our Patreon, patreon.com/thegrimcurriculum, to see a video of us reacting to hearing it ourselves. Let me tell you, I think about it far too much. It's awful. It's cringe, but it's Paul Bernardo. So
It's a lot worse than you would think it is.
Oh,
Like, you would think
it's-
it's like, yeah, we're saying it's bad, okay, but it's like worse than you can imagine.
so bad. And I can't wrap my head around the emotional whiplash of being horrifically assaulted for days and then having this fucking idiot test out his rap, his mixtape on you.
Yeah. Delusion.
Delusional.
The thing that really kind of threw a wrench into everything was that witness who called and said that there was what she described as a cream Camaro that took her away. They started looking for it, but the reality of it was that Paul drove a gold Nissan.
This is why eyewitness accounts are notoriously
Yeah.
unreliable, because those are two completely different colors, two completely different cars. The Camaro was something that everyone was really advertising. It was all over the news, and police had even put up billboards around the town asking people to report it if they saw one. So, like,
can you imagine them seeing it? They're seeing this, Paul and Karla. They're seeing the news, and they're probably just laughing at this point.
Yeah, they're probably like, thank God that woman gave them some bullshit. Inadvertently, of course, but still.
Meanwhile, Kristen's parents were on the news begging for her safety. Search teams scoured the area desperately looking for clues. At one point, 2,200 people showed up to help.
One of Kristen's shoes was found, which confirmed that something terrible had indeed happened.
The group donned green ribbons in support of Kristen. It was all anyone was talking about. Karla's friends were not only aware, they all participated in vigils. At one point, they even invited her along. She didn't go, but she talked to them about how tragic it all was. She was basically like, I can't believe this is happening. This is so crazy. Meanwhile, she's in the basement.
She's literally in her house and still alive. Like, most people think she's probably gone from this world at this point.
Yeah.
She's still alive. For 3 days, she was repeatedly tortured by the two of them. And when Paul got tired, Karla would simply just take over for him.
Something else that shows just how depraved they are is in between the torture, they'd kind of just like chill. Like, Paul would go and he would rent movies for them. They'd watch movies, and then they would torture her. And then they'd watch a movie, and then they would torture her, and then he'd rap. So more torture.
The kind of emotional whiplash that would
Yes.
just destroy your psyche.
One lawyer described Karla in the tapes as having a feral joy.
I think that's very accurate.
Yeah.
During those 3 days, Paul also made her say things like,
You deserve all the girls at my school. You are so nice and so powerful, so sexy, so much in control of everything. No one can overpower you. Master, King of Kings, you're the best man in the whole world. You're so good at what you do. I'm surprised there's not 10,000 girls by now waiting in line for you.
as much as she's going through horrific torture at this point, how do you not just laugh in this monster's face?
Oh,
Having to just
yeah.
regurgitate this egotistical nonsense.
And he's like making her rehearse this and say it. And like
Oh my
he's telling her
God.
to say, but it's like the other girls, the other victims, where he would make them say, you're better than my boyfriend.
Mhm.
I love you. Things like that. Like, he's just
pumping up his own ego.
Yeah, exactly.
At one point, it's likely that Kristen attempted to escape. Paul had asked her what she wanted to eat, and she suggested that they get a meal from a restaurant that was far away, and he obliged. This meant that Karla and Kristen were alone for about half an hour. During that time, Kristen begged for Karla to let her go.
Karla knew that this would never be an option. Kristen knew their names, their faces, and where they lived. It had already been decided that Kristen French would never leave 57 Bayview Avenue.
On April 19th, 1992, Kristen was killed. The cause of death is not fully known. Once again, Paul and Karla told different stories. She said that Paul strangled her with a cord. However, forensics would show that Kristen was likely hit in the head with a mallet.
The likely theory is that it was Karla. However, this was never confirmed. Matching bruises were found on both Kristen and Leslie that indicated that they were both pinned down by Karla at some point. And they know it was Karla because you could tell it was bruises that had been inflicted by knees that were pinning them down, and the bruises were too small to have been from Paul.
Upon her death, Kristen was taken to the bathroom where her body was scrubbed clean. Her hair was cut, and then they wrapped her in a blanket and dumped her in the ditch by the side of the road. She was so badly beaten, her face was barely identifiable. After they killed her, they went to an Easter dinner with Karla's family. I'm seeing a pattern here about
Yes.
having people over or going for like a holiday dinner while this is happening.
Like, it's nothing. It's like, oh, we painted our kitchen, let's go for dinner. Like, that's how I
Yeah.
think that they look at this.
We disposed of a body. Oh, we'll make it in time for ham.
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
To me, it's interesting how much effort they put into disposing of Leslie, but not Kristen. Because I think at this point, they just don't see the need for it. Because in their minds, police hadn't questioned them about the murder. They have the wrong vehicle. They have no clue who it is. And I think that they thought they were just going to keep getting away with it.
Yep, I think they saw how much effort they put in the first place. Saw that the police found the body anyway fairly quickly, and then was like, well, they still haven't freaking caught us, so why bother to all the trouble this time? They won't
Easter
catch
dinner
us.
to get to.
Exactly. The body of Kristen French was found 2 weeks later. She was lying face down, covered with leaves, and she was laying in the fetal position. She was found completely nude. When she went missing, she was wearing a Mickey Mouse watch, and this was gone.
And that watch is going to be very important later. Canadian police formed the Green Ribbon Task Force in an attempt to find her killer. The FBI joined in to help from a forensic standpoint.
Meanwhile, things between Paul and Karla began to sour. The physical abuse got really bad in the summer of 1992. Friends and family would often see bruises on her, but she made excuses for him. It wasn't until January of 1993 that she was finally persuaded to go live with a friend of her sister's whose husband was a police officer.
The photos of what he did to her are terrible. Her eyes are bruised badly and almost swollen shut.
They took her to the hospital where a report was filed against Paul. When she was interviewed, she told police that Paul Bernardo had murdered Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French.
It would be around that time that the DNA samples taken from him years before would be tested, and he would finally be linked to his crimes as the Scarborough rapist. They told Karla about this, and she confessed that she knew it was him all along.
This would be the beginning of the end for Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo.
And that's where we'll pick back up next week with the conclusion of this horrific series.
Where's your head at?
Something I keep thinking about is I don't know if they would have been caught before killing somebody else if she hadn't gone to the police. But I find it interesting that she's okay with everything he has done up until this point. And then when the violence is turned to her, she's like, I am telling everybody who you are. I am blaming you for everything. And one thing that we didn't touch upon here, but right now and towards the trial, she is going to start reading a lot of books about battered women's syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be one of her biggest defenses is I did this because Paul made me.
He coerced me.
Yes.
I was scared for my life.
I had no choice. Meanwhile, she's in a leather mask and she's cackling while she is very, very brutally assaulting these women.
The irony of all this for me is if Paul had never turned it back on Karla, they would have gone on for a lot longer. But like you say, the second that violence is turned fully back in her direction, she's like, oh, hell no. Snitch, 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 snitch.
The interesting thing, too, is one of the things that she would tell Kristen was, Paul and I are no longer sleeping together. We are no longer in love. And she would kind of like talk shit about Paul to Kristen. Like in her mind, in Karla's brain, Kristen was a girlfriend of hers.
Wild.
And that is just, if that doesn't show you how much of a sociopath she is, I don't know what will.
I've heard the term cognitive dissonance used a lot when describing Karla because she, I think, truly believes she's doing one thing, but then acts in the opposite direction. Like you say, it's like she's participating and very much having a good time torturing these women, women, young girls, kids, basically. But in her head, she's like, oh, but we were friends. Like, it was fine. You know, it's all Paul. And it's like, yeah, you've made yourself believe that.
Yeah.
But that's not how you acted.
And when they brought that up and they were like, after they saw the tapes, after everything happened, and they were like, Karla, you look really happy in these tapes. She's like, well, at this point, I had learned that when there's a camera on me, I have to smile.
I think there was a little more to it than that, sweetheart.
Yeah.
I can't. Well, we'll get into it more when we start talking about Karla's tapes, her deposition, her big confessions. I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall in the room when she made her quote unquote deal with the devil, or rather, they made the deal with her as the devil, to be like, oh, yeah, you know, she participated, but, you know, she was abused, she was coerced. Then they hear Paul's side, see the tapes, and they're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
We have let her go, and there's really nothing we can do about it now because we made that deal. That is legally binding.
Yeah.
Oh, rough.
Yeah. So with that, we got social media. Go follow us on it. Go check it out. Whatever platform you're listening on, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, show some love. It goes a long way, and we certainly appreciate that as well.
Yeah. And we're also at the point in the episode where we give a shout out to our lovely patrons over on Patreon. Y'all are the best.
Yeah, you are. Thank you so much to Kevinus Musicus, Steven Centauri, Atlantean Jedi, Judy, Mayhem Mudkip, Hillary, Brian, Lisa, and Bob.
Thank you so much. And shout out to everybody else that's over on the Patreon as well. Just a quick reminder, if you are signed up for our free tier, you can get yourself a 1-week free trial where you get access to all the tiers. So you can take a look at the actual video episodes and take in a few of those if you like, see if that's something you're into. If not, no worries. We just love having you guys around regardless.
Yeah, and for those of you on the free tier, we are going to be posting an early episode reveal sometime next week for our next topic. And we got all sorts of fun stuff on. We have Paul Bernardo's rap on there, man. Like, come on now.
Yeah, fun if you like really cringy shit.
Yeah, if you want to just like clench and just like not want to breathe for a minute while you're just happy that you're not in the room with them.
I think if Paul Bernardo ever had a permanent cellmate and he tried to rap for him, that would end up with Paul Bernardo getting shanked in prison.
You know he was rapping for people in prison. I guarantee you. He's like, I'm Paul Jason Teal. Yo, yo, yo. Do you know the name of his like hit song that he had? In his mind, hit song. I'm doing quotations for
Hit
those of you
song.
who can't see.
No, tell me.
Deadly Innocence.
You know what? No, that does ring a bell.
Yep.
Oh, God. Deadly Innocence.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here, Paul Bernardo. Anywho, one more week of this. We'll get to the end. We'll get there together.
Fascinating series, though. I'm not going to lie.
Is.
It has been difficult, but to me, it's always about the fact that And I never want, when I complain about it, I never want to seem like I don't enjoy this, because I do, in the sense that it blows my mind that people like this exist.
It's fascinating. It's definitely from a scientific point of view. I find it interesting. To me, it's part of history as well. Obviously, a very dark side of history. Yeah, I mean, if you've been listening and watching this long, we don't need to explain ourselves to you.
You know what's up.
You're freaky little true crimers as
Yeah,
well.
you are. You little freaks.
Anyway.
Thank you all so much for listening. This has been The Grim Curriculum.
Okay. So I want to tell you a very short story. This would have fit very well into our strange and unusual death segment on Extra Credit, but it's just short, so I thought I'd share it with you today. In 1845, 79 people died in a bridge collapse over the River Bure because a large crowd had gathered to watch a clown in a bathtub be pulled upriver by 4 geese. Bye.
Bye. What a show.
What a show. I mean, they didn't have Netflix in those days.